Welcome everybody to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn and I'm here with Jeremy Law. Jeremy, how are you doing today?
I am really great, thank you. How's everybody going today?
Hey everybody in chat, we've got some friendly faces. We've got Festus in the house, Mercule, me, I am in the house. I'm in my house. We've got Johanna, RB, Dee's here as well. Lovely to see you again, Dee. Yeah, great to have you hanging out with us today. Happy inauguration day for all of our friends in the US.
Yes,
it is a big auspicious day.
Yep.
Good luck.
Very tentative day as well.
It is for sure. We are all watching. So yeah, let's go. So this is part two of two-part series. So 2 of 2, hanging out with Jeremy Lord. We'll do a bit of a recap in a second. But if you did miss on part 1 and you're watching this either live or you're watching the replay or something like that, we'll put a description down the bottom to part 1 so you can go back and check that out if you want to see how we got here, because we broke down a bit of a brief and we talked a little bit about the client and artist relationship, which is often missing information. So there's a lot of good stuff in there for beginners and also like advanced people alike. We have a bit of a chat about some of the things that you might want to ask during the briefing process and the relationship between the client and the artist. Let's get some music playing. How about that? We're here for an hour. The chat we're using today is at behance.net/live. So if you're watching on YouTube or anything like that, you want to say hi, let us know where you are, how you're doing today, please do. It'd be lovely to see your face pop up in chat. But yeah, Jeremy, do you want to give us a... Oh yeah, no, you go on.
Ask a bunch of questions as well. It's always super cool when I'm like doing all this and like questions come in. It's always really nice, usually like very interesting questions. So yeah, please don't hesitate.
Yep, and we're just shouting out the questions, so throw them in chat, and if we can ask the question as we're going along, we shall. So yeah, we're here for a good time, not a long time. So Jeremy, do you want to give us a recap? We can jump back in, just kind of very quickly check out those steps.
Right,
okay,
so
I'm jumping over to your screen now.
All right, so we've got a brief, like a mock-up brief that you have sent me. As you can see, Flynn has sent me this email and just kind of given me a basic rundown of like what a brief would look like. First contact from a client, this is what you get. As far as these things go, this is a really good one. There's a lot of detail in here. The client in this instance has sent me links to images for like referencing, which is always something that's super important. We spoke about that last time of like, don't just say words to me like cool and trendy. Give me images of what you consider that's going to speak way more volumes about what you're actually after than you giving me stuff like, I don't know, just make it cool. Like that's super vague. So getting these images are really good. And so what we kind of dissected after this is like, all right, what's the information that's missing here? We've got a hint of a timeline down here, next few weeks. That's still pretty rough. We're not talking about budget. It's pretty vague. Obviously, all this is intentional. Flynn has like made this on purposely kind of bad so that we can ask questions. But this is, again, like typically the kind of thing that your client would say. They're basically just saying here, we just need artwork to promote our upcoming game. What does that mean? Do you need like, box cover art? Do you need posters? Do you need stickers, t-shirts, presentation, digital, all that kind of stuff? So all these kind of questions that you need to ask in order to get a really good idea of what it is. So then from there, we move on to, once those questions are answered, we move on to the kind of the sketch phase. And we do lots and lots of sketches. Some of them are pretty rough, some of them are a little bit more detailed. Important always to number this. We spoke about this last time. It allows the client to go like, I like half of number 5 with number 9 as well, rather than saying stuff like the one in the middle underneath the third one across from the left in the top row, slightly to the side is like, no, that's no good. Number these sketches, always going to help you and the client. Once the client chooses a particular composition, then we go on and we make kind of more detailed versions of that, so we can kind of produce a few here. Obviously, you want to do more than one. You don't want to do too many either. You want to still like remain in control of what's happening and not just throw it all onto your client and just be like, yeah, you choose out of like 55 different options. That's a bit confusing for them. So we've got something like this. And then once something like this has been approved, and so for instance, here we've got number 2, we can then go in and start kind of coloring and inking that up. So I've got this sketch here. If I just turn off all these layers, you will see the sketch that's in here. So this has had a couple of changes since you see it here, but the gist of it is still there. And it's coming up with a kind of a character concept for it.
Kind of copy and then just paste it into a new, like, did you literally just copy and paste those that line work in? And
so
added
what
some
you're
things,
seeing here is this sketch here, which I will bump the opacity on. That is literally this one.
Right.
Literally just copy pasted. This is now a bigger document. So this is one of those things. This is an A2, A2 poster size. This is also where it's important for you to get those information from the client early on and say, what are you using this on? You know, like if they're going to think about printing this on like a side of a giant building somewhere, then obviously you're not going to be able to work in PSD. You're going to have to work in vector, which in my case would mean I would turn down this job because I don't know how to do this in Illustrator. I probably could, but it would be a real pain. So things like that are important to know from the get-go. In this case, you're just after box art, but I've still made it as a poster just in case you want to use it as a poster, and then the artwork gets more exposure. So I generally, because I'm working in Photoshop, I will tend to just work at a higher resolution than I think I need, just in case, which is one of the pitfalls potentially of something like Photoshop, because it's all bitmap. You need to kind of plan ahead a little bit more than Illustrator, where you can just do it and it doesn't matter what size you're doing it at. It's a lot more versatile. But again, you know, I prefer working in Photoshop, so that's what I do.
Nice.
So yeah, so then we've just inked this up. So the way I would ink this up, for instance, I've left a few little bits and pieces that still remain to be kind of inked up. But the general gist here is we've got, you can see that I've got a few different layers. So I've got the OTL, which is my shorthand for outline.
So that's just how you've labeled the file over there.
Exactly.
Like your layer.
Yeah, so I've got sketching is here, culls is colors. That's where I'm going to stick all my colors. The type, which I wouldn't do, we can touch upon this a little bit later. That would be your job as the client or your design team or whoever. Generally speaking, that's not my job to do this. Neither is it to put all these like logos in there and everything else. But it's always good when I do something like this, even though it's not my job, I will plan ahead and just put these in there, even if they're low res kind of things that I've found online and they're a bit shoddy. It just lets me know, like, okay, this composition still works on this and I can compose my image with that. So that's always a little bit of an important thing. But yeah, I label them like that.
Yeah, and it probably helps the client like quite a lot, like to understand like where these things could be placed. Like if I was a designer and I was looking at it, it'd be like, oh great, like they've actually already thought of this, and you know, how you could have the type behind. Maybe they don't want to do that because of the restrictions of their logo. Like if you have something like Cyberpunk, I don't think it's ever seen like behind, but these guys might want to do that. Or maybe they've got the logo down the bottom left, but the title of the expansion or whatever, like they really like the text treatment that you've done. They're like, actually, we really like that. That's a really cool aesthetic. Let's pick that up and run with it. Like, thanks for the free idea, Jeremy.
Yeah, totally. And look, you know, like obviously, like you said, it's technically a free idea, and why am I not getting paid for it? But it's nice little thing. It's no skin off my back to do something like this. And if it gives them an idea and kind of, you know, makes me look good for them and gets me another job with them in the future, then that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's go in, and you'll see that there's also, I've got the main outline here. But there's also these sashimi knives and the hair decorations, which I've stuck on a different layer. The reason I do that is pretty simple. It allows me to like move it around. If I'm not sure of where I want to place it or anything like that, I can move it around. And so you'll see that there is a layer mask on the knives, for instance, that blocks them because they're going behind this. And I've also put a layer mask on my outlines because the knives are also blocking the belt, so they're kind of in front and behind of that main layer, so it's good to kind of mess around with that. But for things like this, where you might kind of run into an issue if you try and draw that, like for instance, that hair, I'm very keen to, and I've drawn in white, that's no good. Okay, cool. I'm very keen to get the shape of that right. And so doing it in one continuous line is always going to be a lot better. rather than trying to go like, all right, cool, I'm going to do these ones like this, and then go bang, and then like continue here. And it's like, that's not a very fluid line. If you look at it, there's a bit of a break there. So what I will tend to do is do that on an underneath layer like this. And then I can just lower the opacity of that so I can see what I'm doing. And then I'll do these hair decorations on a separate layer. And that's going to allow me then to come in and put a layer mask on this guy and come in with my black and just erase that in. But you'll see that I don't have to be too careful of my outline because it's on a separate layer, right? So I'm not running into this issue where I've done this, I've done this and that, and I'm trying to like do this, and then I have to go in and like erase in here, but I might like dig into my line. It's all a little bit kind of crunky to do that. So I will then kind of just do that on this layer. And so what I'll do for things like this, for instance, if we go back to my sketch, please. Yep. I've got straight lines. So straight lines, because I don't work like this, because I don't do this kind of thing where it's like, you know, scratching away the line.
Right.
I tend to do one solid line. You'll see me doing, those of you guys who've watched streams before with me on it, like for instance, this line here, you'll see me kind of do that. And then it's like, nope, that's no good. Undo it, try it again, because it all has to be one solid line for me. I can't afford to do this thing where I'm kind of making the line as I go. And so on things like, for instance, these blades that need to be really sharp or like really straight, like we can't afford to have, you know, like a bump in them that doesn't look really good. It looks a bit old and battered. Things like this, I mean, I could probably do one that was relatively straight, even though like you see here, but as soon as you do the other one, it's like, oh man, I need to be a little bit more careful. So I didn't do too bad that time.
That's pretty good.
But what I'll do is I'll turn off a few settings, and you'll see why right now is I'll use the shift tool and go from point to point. So I'll just click here and then hold down shift and go over to here. And you see that's kind of drawn a straight line for me. But because I've got pressure on, it's not uniform all the way through, which I want that. So I'm going to turn off my shape dynamics and I'm going to turn off my transfer. And that's going to take away this idea that it's going to get thick and thin with pressure. Now it's all the same pressure no matter how thick I am applying it to. Then I can just lower the opacity here and just go bang, bang, bang. And I've got nice, clean, straight lines. And then I can go back into that brush, and by selecting it, it'll just set all the default settings back onto it, turn my smoothing up to like 30, and then we're good to go. And so now I can...
So will you like do all of your... Will you switch back and forth like that? Or will you kind of go, oh, I know I've got like, I don't know, 10 different straight lines I need to do, and then bulk do them all in one hit?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It's probably wise to not have to keep going back and forth into those settings. Not that it like takes hours, but you know, while I'm here, I might as well just do the other ones while I'm here. Sometimes as well, when I'm not necessarily after a straight line, like because of the themes that I will draw with, I will often have to draw like a samurai sword. And that can be really tricky because it needs to be exactly the right curve of the blade, not too, like there's a very precise kind of science to it, and this just looks like it's made of like banana puree. It's horrible. Nobody wants that. So what I'll do in those cases is I'll actually use the pen tool, which is a rare kind of like foray into almost like Illustrator land, and then I will have more control over what I'm doing. And so I'll use that pen tool in that sense, and maybe stick that on a new layer, and then go into that and say, I don't want a fill. Give me a fill, please. Where are my properties? Properties. There we go. Nope, that's not it. Why did you not do what I wanted you to do?
Fill keeps hiding for me as well. Don't know why.
That's very strange. Why are you doing this to me?
Because we're streaming. That's why.
Because we're streaming, probably. Anyways, yeah, so I'll basically just kind of do this thing where I'll use the pen tool to do that. And normally it works, and today it's not working. So yeah, I'll then create an outline, and that will be my outline there, just to kind of make that nice, smooth, clean line. But more than often, I am just kind of doing this drawing, and so then it's just a matter of me to do this kind of stuff, and then I can just continue drawing. So then I can just kind of do, pop in these things. So these guys are like, again, so we're talking a little bit about like character design on Tuesday. And what's interesting here is, like, obviously with concept art and character design, it's not necessarily about what just looks cool. Obviously, you want to make a character that looks cool, yeah. And you gamers, people reading comics or anything like that want to look at something that looks cool, of course. But when you're creating it, if that's your main concern, it's kind of like, it's basically exactly like graphic design, where it's like, if you're using your opinion of something, that's potentially going to be an issue, because it's like things like this, right? So I have created a bunch of visors for her. So we've got this little monocle kind of thing, like little, like almost like Dragon Ball Z reference, which, I like to do that a little bit in my work, and just throw in things for people to be like, hey, that kind of reminds me of this. That's fine. It's like flirting a little bit with plagiarism potentially, but still far away enough that it's just a reference to a thing and not plagiarized. So we've got this little monocle. We've got this little chef headband because she's got the sushi knives. Then we've got this one, like full cyberpunky kind of like visor, Oculus kind of Rift thing, goggles. This one, which I'm kind of partial to myself, just this like weird little like front helmet visor, looks like one of those like COVID safe masks. And then this one, which is just like a variation of the first one with just a full visor. And so in these situations, what you would normally do is go, all right, what's her backstory here? Her backstory, as far as I see it, is this. She is obviously kind of Japanese. She's got that geisha hairdo. The jacket's got the kimono sleeves. So originally what I had done is done this as a kind of like a gunslinger kind of thing, and I need to turn off all my layers now. There we go.
I got two questions from chat as well when we've done with this. I just want to throw them in before we move on too far.
So you see this now. She's got like the gun hands. She's like pew pew, and she's got this gun. And it doesn't really make sense. Like, why would she be like? It would make more sense if this was a little bit more Japanesey vibes. So then it becomes this thing where it's like, all right, cool. She is now a sushi chef. Who's going to kill you with, or slice you up with, these like sashimi knives. And therefore what's happening in here is all these little tags is what you see in a lot of Japanese restaurants, where this is basically the menu. And these little Japanese words here are just all like the different kinds of sashimi that you can make.
Right.
So
cool.
This like allows you to make it a little bit more surprising, like do something that you wouldn't necessarily normally do, but it's also got a bit of a backstory behind it as to why she is like this. And it, like, I still think it looks cool, but if a client goes like, oh, what's the deal with the stuff in the hair? I don't really dig it. You've got a reason why that exists that fits into the character, which might be able to convince your client to be like, oh yeah, actually, I do like that. Let's keep him in there. It's not what I would have done, but it's a little bit unexpected. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. So backstory behind something like this is always really, really crucial.
I think that's really cool. And that can like really help the idea generation process, right? Like you've kind of got this purpose now. So now I don't know, you might be looking at the belt buckle or the back, or maybe they ask you to do three entirely different poses now of this same character because they love it so much. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. I have this foundation to go from now. It's not just cyberpunk. Suddenly you're basically building this character. You got the backstory, and it will make it a lot easier to start coming up with other ideas.
That's exactly right.
Super cool. Hey, can I ask two questions that we got from chat? So Steve is asking about the layers. Does it help with allowing for sections of the image to be used separately, like just a portrait of the woman? So like you're working with a lot of layers. Does that help with allowing for sections of the image to be used separately?
Yes and no. So I've got a bunch of layers in here, mostly because I'm still at that phase where it's like I'm making decisions. And so on that side note, I'll ask you guys to which one of these visors you guys prefer as well. So we'll get that in a second. So have a think about which of these things we'll kind of use. We'll stray a little bit from what I just said and just make it look cool, and you guys can get involved in the artwork. But coming back to the layers, the way I've set up my layers here is essentially because I need to put the knives on a separate layer because it allows me to kind of create that a little bit more seamlessly. And then the hair decorations here will be on a separate layer as well, because I need to then go back in and erase the background of the hair. But what I will eventually probably do at some point is smash these three outline layers together once I'm happy with it. And then there won't be a new layer. Now, it's an interesting question because you do every now and then get these jobs that require you to work with either an animator or another designer. And they will do things like, you know what, like this would be really cool if we did some like VR experience with this poster. So like we're going to put a little like QR code down here or something, and when you scan it, like she winks at you and like her hand gets animated, right? So I'm not an animator, so I wouldn't know how to do that. But what I would then have to do, and I would need to know this as I'm building the file, so this is again one of those questions that you need to make sure you ask the client, is this whole section here right up to this will need to be on a layer of its own. Colors, outline, effects, and all, because that whole section needs to be able to then move in After Effects. So I would then, like I normally wouldn't draw the arm on a separate layer just as here, and you can see that's not been the case because it doesn't make sense for me to do that. But if I knew that I had to do a thing, then like, yeah, all these bits here would need to be on separate layers. And I might even need to do like a little bit extra of that sleeve because that arm's going to move that way, and so it's going to be exposed, so that's going to sit behind this layer, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole kind of like layer setup thing that you need to think about if you're working with other people that you don't necessarily need to consider if you're just doing flat artwork. So yeah, that's a great question. But for me, if it's just something like this, I will probably not make too many layers on the artwork, simply just because it becomes a little bit complicated. If somebody is like, hey, can you just do like, can we get a sticker of just the head? That's easy enough in Photoshop for me to like flatten this image, cut out the head, and then pop that onto a new file.
Yeah, cool. That's cool. And also another question from Johanna was, with the small character elements and accessories, would you consider making an asset library for this, or would you prefer to create it from scratch every time? Which I think is a very great question because we're going to get stuck into that, I think, at some point.
We will, yeah. So basically that's the outline. And I'll just talking about all this kind of stuff. Like this would be me again for a while, like making all these little like sushi names and sashimi names here. So that's just kind of doing that. So let's just kind of jump ahead here and start talking about like, all right, we're happy with the outline, and I will increase the opacity back to normal on this, and we can just rid of the stuff that's in here, so we're not blocking that too much. And again, this is why this is good that it's on a separate layer, because I can just do this, and with my layer mask I can just come in and clean up the inside, and then it looks like it's in front without having had sacrificed the stuff that's behind it. But to Johanna's question, like, yeah, so you can see I've got all these elements and stickers and things and badges that are going to go on here. So what I tend to do is I've got my library here and if you don't have it, it's in your window, libraries, and you get these different kind of assets. So I've got a bunch of different assets here, which I tend to use. So I've done all these in Illustrator, and they're all these stickers, right, that I will use, and I've categorized them into like stickers, heads-up display elements, and like stuff that's Japanese. This library is like ever growing for me, and I'll tend to, like, whenever I do something, I'll tend to add it to my library, and then it just sits in my library forever. So things like this, for instance, like you can just drag this like devil smiley face in here, and it becomes a vector smart object, which I can edit and make smaller and all that kind of stuff, and just stick on there. And so that's part of the library. These are part of the things that I would use quite often. I probably won't put that in here. I'll probably just put it over here, and then I can rasterize that and just start like placing things into here that I can kind of distort. So you'll notice as well that with vector objects, you don't have all the distortion power that you would with more raster objects. So this one's, for instance, is not allowing me to do the distortion. You'll see that the warp tool up here is grayed out because it is a smart object. So I'm going to undo that and bring it back to the flat version. And I'm going to right click and say rasterize layer. So this is no longer a vector smart object. So the problem with that is the following. So I'm going to undo that. If I bring this in, because it's a vector object, it doesn't matter what size I pull this in at. Because it's vector, this is basically kind of like a halfway vector. It's a vector in Photoshop, but it's not bound to scale. So for instance, those of you guys who are familiar with Photoshop will know that if I do this, like if I free transform down to a small size, hit return, that's now the size of this. If I want to make it big again, I'm going to lose that quality. With vector smart objects, that's not the case. You can see that that has retained full quality of something like this. So we're kind of happy with all of that and we're good to go. So that's a really good thing to have, right? If I then rasterize that, I am making it a raster object, not a vector smart object. So I will lose quality if I mess around with it too much. So again, I'll show you guys what that means. If I make this real small, hit return, and then make it big again, you can see that it's really not great.
So it's all pixelated. You've stretched the pixels. Exactly. There's no more data going in there.
But what I can now do to this is I can do things that I couldn't do before in terms of transformation, and that is to warp this. So I was just going to put this little like smiley face pen here, for instance, real small, and now I can do the thing that I couldn't do before, which is warp it. So before it was all doing one side at a time, and that's no good for me. So now I can actually come in and change that. And we'll see this, I'll do this with the warp tool in a sec. So the warp tool is now on, so I could do that to it if I wanted to. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both, but yeah, things like this is what I would tend to use, so I don't have to redraw it every time. And it's easy and fun to just be like, cool, you know, like here's a bit of an Akira reference for those of you guys who know. We can stick that on here and do all this kind of stuff, right? So again, I've got a smart object here, so I want this one to bend a little bit to be like it's on the sleeve. So I'm going to have to, again, rasterize this. So right click, rasterize layer, and actually I should do this before I rotate it. So little tip for you guys to do this, rasterize it when it is straight if you're going to warp it, because the bounding box gets a bit funny if you don't. And what I mean by that is this. So rasterize layer, done. If I want to warp this now, if I rotate it and stick it on to here, you'll see that the bounding box is bound to this, and when I do my warp tool, it'll do it in a way that makes sense for me to use, right? If I don't do that, and I rotate it before I do warp tool, so apply that rotation, the bounding box is now a square, and it becomes a little bit trickier for me to do it because I don't have that same kind of guide. It's still possible, but it's just that little bit extra step harder for me to do that. So yeah,
cool.
Make it the size you need, rotate it, and then bring it into your thing here. And I'll probably just erase that that outline layer there because we don't really need it. And I just did what I said you shouldn't do. Oh, good. We can just fix that. Yeah, so you see it becomes a little bit harder for me to do what I wanted to do on that. Let me erase this guy here so we can see what we've got. Yeah, cool. That's good enough. It's a little bit bent in a weird way, but all good. Now let's do something a little bit different here. So that's all your libraries of things. So what you'll see as well is something that's really handy. So I've built these in Illustrator. And so I've got all these like files in Illustrator that are ready to go. And so for instance, something like this, I want this to come into my library. And so all I need to do is in Illustrator, hit Command C, so copy that, and then move into Photoshop and just hit Command V. And it will ask me, what do you want to paste it at? Smart Object Pixels. Obviously, you always want to go Smart Objects because why wouldn't you? And that brings that in to here, right? But watch what happens now. As soon as I press return and I confirm that move, you'll notice that that has now added to my library, and I can bring this in and pop that into the folder that I want to pop it into, and that is now a smart object that I can kind of play around with and put in here, and that's now in my library forever.
Awesome. Right? Do you think you have to have libraries open for that to happen? I can't remember if you need to have it open or if it automatically does it.
I'm not sure. That's a good question. I've never actually tested that. It would be one of those weird things. It's like, because you didn't have the window open, we didn't add it to it. But I'm pretty sure that it would add it to it. I mean, it would make sense for it too. But yeah, one never knows, does one?
I'm gonna test that out. Cool.
Yeah. So here's another way to do this. Right. So let's say that we want to be able to maybe change our minds on something. So I'm going to do this 02 sticker here. I should probably create a folder called stickers or badges or whatever I feel like. We'll just do that. And that's going to sit there, and that's all good. But so now in here, I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to do this circle. So let's go with something like this, but a little bit bigger than I need. And I've just gotten that in here. That's all I need, right? I don't put the 02 in there. I'm just putting this guy down. That's all good. And I'm going to right click and say convert to smart objects. And that is now got this little smart object icon, which if I double click on, will open up this file. If you see what this is a PSB file. I'm not sure what the B stands for here. But this is now my asset that's linked to here, right? So if I come in, and I'm going to add a new layer onto this, and I'm going to just quickly draw a 02 on this, and you'll see what happens. It's important to do this on a different layer, but you'll get a thing in a second. So here's our little 02, and then we'll put a smiley face here as well. Bang. Save that.
Like the little smiley face. If I remember,
and that has now updated in here.
I don't know if it's changed, but PSB back in the day used to mean big. It was the same as a Photoshop file, but it was just bigger. But I don't know. That could be my memory not serving well.
It makes sense, I guess. But yeah, so now you guys see that has updated on here. So again, if I undo that, you'll see that it's now just a black circle. Go back into my file. Turn that back on, save it. Remember always to save it, otherwise it doesn't update. And that's all good to go. Now, because this is not a vector smart object, this is a Photoshop smart object, I will be able to distort this, and my warp tool is available to me. So this is a really smart way of doing this kind of stuff. So I'm now going to place this sticker on here. I'm going to rotate that, and I'm going to squish that in a little bit. So basically I'm trying to fit this sticker into this potato shape that I've made, which is this circular badge that fits on this this sleeve here, which is bent a little bit because it's cloth. Now I can take my warp tool, bend that to what I need it to be, and really make sure that I've got the right bend here. Doesn't help that I've filled it in black. I should probably not have filled it in black, just so I can see where it's fitting the outline or not, but there we go. So press return on that. And so that's now, let me just turn off my sketching layer so you can see. That's now looking like it's kind of bent on here, but the really cool thing is I've still got this on here. So if I decide, after I've done all that warp, which is a bit of a process and so on, if I decide, you know what, I don't want the smiley face, or I want it to be something different, I can very easily do that by just changing that file. And we're going to put let's put a star in here instead of a number 2, save that. And all those changes are kept, all those warps and everything are kept in here, all the perspective and everything that I've done to this is kept in here. So this is one of the ways that I very often tend to work with something like this is just making it so that it looks nice and clean, but I can still edit that as I need to go. So I'm just going to properly do this now with an actual 02, and we'll keep this.
That's cool.
I kind of like the Pixel Arcade. So this is a font adequately enough called Arcade Classic.
Oh, there you go. Nice. I like
so this is like pixelated font.
It's a really fat.
Yeah, it's a great font.
I really like that too.
I use it quite often. There's another one I think that is called Arcane Karmatic Arcade, which is like the more like 3D kind of vibe, like a bit more Street Fighter-y vibe, but this will do for this, and then we can save that and then go back in here and it's updated it to this. So we're all good to go. And you know what? Don't like this circle being black. I think I like it better being blue. Is good. Save, and there we go.
Hey,
so that's
side note,
like,
check it out. My memory actually served well. PSBs for a file size over 2 gigabytes. Thanks, RB. Checked it out for us. There you go. Look at that. Memory serves. It's the first time for everything.
Good.
I've got a side question for you, just very quickly. Full marks, hooray. Are there any artists that inspire you? Off the top of your head, are there one or two artists that inspire you?
Yeah, there's a few. There's, as is the case these days, you don't know their actual names, you just know their Instagram names.
Right.
I really like Wen Juin, who is, I believe, a Chinese artist who does like very kind of similar to what I do, these kind of like bubblegum, cyberpunky, Japanesey kind of vibes. So I really like his work.
Man, any idea how to spell that for us so we can check it out?
Yes, I will tell you how to spell that. It is like this.
I like it.
I can't remember. There's two N's somewhere. It's either the two N's are either here or there. I'm not sure. I feel like they're probably here, but yeah, it's all just one word. Yeah.
Cool. I'm sure someone in chat will find it.
Yeah, and so like just that I find that really cool. There's also Katsushiro Otomo, not Katsushiro Otomo. That is the guy who made Akira. His son, whose name is it escapes me right now. Of course, he does again similar kind of thing, like very like corrupted Japanese kind of things. Very very different style. In terms of the medium he uses
right.
very realistic pencil and pen. Very different to what the visual style that I do, but thematically quite sort of in line with what I do. But yeah, so those two guys definitely are one of the ones that I look at a lot
awesome.
In that sense.
Quick shout out to Tim in chat. Tim's been helping me with some of my microphone issues. So Tim, you can just tell me how is my microphone sounding? He was helping me out the other day, talking me off the cliff of just spending a lot of money on new equipment. So
yep.
But no, to Tim's question, I do not know what the PSDT file format stands for. No idea. I think I got
Photoshop document template.
Oh, your template? Yep, there you go.
I guess
everybody in chat knew it. I didn't know
it. Yeah, so now I'm just coming in and filling in the jacket. So you'll notice that I'm like, when I'm over here, I'm going all crazy. And as soon as I go back onto the actual color, I'm being a little bit more careful of what I'm doing. The reason for that is this is why I've got this base color here, which is basically everything that's happened in the illustration is forming that base. And because this layer is now a kind of like a child layer, that's the base layer is its parent layer, anything that I do outside of that will not get filled. So I can hit fill now and you'll see nothing because I'm using the same color. If I choose like, let's go with an orange here. If I flick that into orange, you'll see that everywhere on here has done that. So if I go over here and do that, then obviously that will fill over there, but anything outside of where color has been applied on the base layer will not get anything happen. So it's a good, clean, easy way for me to not necessarily have to be too careful all the time of where I do my selections, and I just need to be careful of putting them in here. So for instance, on here, I need to follow the neckline and the cheek, but as soon as I go here, I can do whatever I want, and that will then get filled.
So is there an advantage to having like quite thick lines then? Like, is there a particular weight 100%. That you'll do your outlines with?
Yeah, totally. And that's a good question. That's the reason why, and I'm not sure what came first, like the chicken or the egg kind of thing, but it is this thing of having these thick outlines, which look a little bit kind of like manga-esque, allows me to then do this kind of thing here, where you'll see that with my lasso tool, if I've got like the jitters and I'm trying to fill this in, it doesn't matter, because that line thickness gives me that kind of buffer to do it. So that's why I will tend to use that line thickness there, because it just allows me to fill it in a little bit more cleanly. And again, that's just because of the style that I use. I'm not using a very painterly style. I'm using flat colors. Therefore, I need to apply fills, and applying fills means I have to redraw the outlines if I'm not using nice thick outlines, and nobody wants to do that.
Who's got time for that?
Nobody got time for that.
Hey, we've got about 15 minutes left, maybe a little bit less. So if you guys have some questions, throw them in chat. And I think we were going to also pick a visor. Like, you'd sketched out a couple of visors as well, which I think, if we have time for that.
Let's do that right now. So let's go.
Which is always fun.
So we've got this little monocle. Let me just turn off the colors here so we can see that. There we go. We've got this little monocle, like single kind of eye one. We have got the full like cyberpunk visor kind of vibe. We've got this like helmet safety, COVID safe visor, and then the full kind of like, 80s pit viper kind of vibe of the kind of the visor with the little call center mic. So which one?
So you guys let us know in chat. Should we number them like we did for the client?
So we've got 01.
Yep.
We got 02.
Cool.
03.
3.
And then 04.
And 4. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 in chat, and then we'll just check it out. And that's the way we'll go. So you let us know.
Cool.
Majority wins.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, again, like this would just be me spending some time here doing the colors. The background, this little kind of design on the background, I would do in the same way that I've done the 02. So I would make a new file, make it into a smart object, open it up in a different file, and then just keep working on that, and then warp it to the needs that I have to do here. But I'll just touch upon really quickly something here where all my colors here are happening. What I tend to do, because when you're doing manga style, the eyes are incredibly important, and the eyes is where like 90% of what identifies as manga style happens. So I generally tend to do my eyes on in a different group altogether, separate to my basic colors, because it just means that I can have that little bit more control over what happens. So I'm going to do that right now and fill in the eyes here. And that's going to be, again, like really super crucial for this process. But what I'll also do is later on, I will stick an effect on this, which is going to allow me to, sorry for the constant zooming in and out, by the way. It's going to allow me to have a little bit more control on the shine. So again, the eyes are super important, and the shine of the eyes is ridiculously important as well, and that is crucial to get right in that sense. So we've got, let's pop in a color here, And we're going to do this like this.
Quick shout out to Alex Lahores in the chat. Hello, mate.
Oi, Alex. Long time no see.
Haven't seen you for 12 hours.
Yeah, so we're just sticking this in now and doing those kind of like lots of reflections happening on a manga eye. Lots of like, lots of shine, lots of kind of like looks alive. It looks like a little bit kind of wet, I guess. And that is going to be always something that's super important when you're doing these kind of things to include on this. But really what's going to make it pop is as soon as you put that shine on there, that eye is really going to come to life. And it's going to make all the difference in terms of that. So there's different levels of this as well. Like if you go on like something like Pinterest and you type in like manga eye, you'll see what I'm talking about. And it's just like there's some really intense levels of detail that happen when like putting in reflections and all that kind of stuff. I tend to keep mine a little bit simpler than that. But yeah, it's always super fun when you start doing something like this and it really starts to kind of come to life. It's really very satisfying to kind of do. And so, yeah, again, like at this stage, I could pop in another one in here and then it starts,
right.
like it can also start to get a little bit kind of a bit too much. So we got something like this. Then I will probably come in and I should probably name my layers here because it's just a good thing to do. I'm going to put something like this in, and that looks bad right now, but as soon as I drop the opacity, you'll get this kind of like eyelid shadow. It'll just give it a little bit more volume and make a little bit more sense. So do that one. That's just a black layer that's had its opacity reduced. And then for the final touch, and this is where it's going to start to get a little bit messy. Like I've got lots of layers here. As soon as I'm finished with the actual drawing and everything, I can get rid of this sketching layer. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go above all the outlines and I'm going to do this layer called eye shines. And this is important to do above my outlines because obviously I need that to shine on top of everything else. And so coming in with this white now, I'm going to go into here, another one there. And you can see immediately that that's given the eyes like so much more depth and volume. Like they look like there's a bit of like,
it's more
they're
like
not
glass.
Just like slightly painted on. Yeah, exactly. It looks like there's a layer of glass and then there's an eye behind it, which is exactly what happens here. But I'm going to put an outer glow on this. And I'm going to make this let's go with that. Let's go with a pink. And that's on linear dodge add. You probably don't want it on normal. Normal will look a little bit like weird. Linear dodge will actually look like light and it will impact areas and kind of increase the light that happens with that. And so you just get this nice kind of look of like, there's a bit of shine happening. It's probably maybe a little bit too big. There we go. That's a bit better. And so, yeah, again, see, like immediately, like this is just kind of flat and dead. This has just got that spark of life to it. So that's something that I will very often do as well. Have we got a decision on the monocle, on the visor?
Number 4.
Number 4, righto. All right, so number 4 is this little guy. Cool. All right, so I will stick that in, and I'll probably do it on a separate layer again, because the outline for this, and I'll do this quickly. How are we going for time, by the way?
We've got 6 minutes left. 5 minutes. Well, about 6 minutes left, and we should be sweet.
I'm going to do a new group here called visor, because I'm going to need to do a couple of things here. So traditionally what I would do, obviously, is, as you guys have seen, I would ink in black. Right, so I would come in and do this. I'll do this very roughly because we're a little bit more pressed for time, but you'll still get the idea. So we've got all of this happening. So that's the visor. Then I need to do the earpiece. And the reason I'm doing these a little bit separately is quite simply because the black in my drawing so far represents solid stuff, right? So it's all like hard surfaces. And again, like I'm going a lot faster. This is actually something that that I'd like to kind of explore a little bit as well. This idea of like not being super clean all the time and doing something that feels a little bit more drawing-ish is something that could be interesting to do. But yeah, so we got something like this. And then I'm going to stick a new layer in here, turn my outlines back on. And this is all above my outlines for this reason here, which is I am going to fill this with a color. So let's make it a nice kind of this color. Okay. And then lower the opacity on that. So we've got that kind of like glass visor effect. But as you can see, like this black outline here is not really doing it for me. So what I would then do is I would change that to be a little bit more of the color that I have gotten there and a little bit brighter because it's glass. So light works in glass slightly differently than in other, well, a lot differently than in other surfaces. And that's just going to give me this kind of like a little bit more kind of see-through vibe. And then what I would do is, again, I would bring in, like, let's bring in this little reticle here. And again, this is just one of those like heads-up displays elements that I've gotten in my library. We can hit return on that, rasterize this layer, going super quick here. Stick that on my visor. So bang. Bend that a little bit. Cool.
Very
rotate. Cool. And then I'm going to change the color of this so that it's a little bit brighter again. So it needs to be, again, it's like it's lit up. So we want that to be a little bit brighter and give it a bit of a color as well. There we go. And then stick a glow on that as well to make it feel a little bit brighter. That's too much. Just enough that it's got that kind of vibe that we want.
The glow adds a lot to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it instantly just makes it feel a little bit more, yeah, like it's like, you know, heads up display. So this is again where I'd add in a bunch of different things here. I'd add in some type, like all these different kind of things that can happen on something like this. Like this is where you start to have a little bit of fun with stuff like this and just go like, all right, what's happening here? Put in some references, different things. And then, yeah, there you go.
Amazing. Man, we went through a lot today. I'm surprised at how much you got through. Well done. Incredible. Yeah, we hope you guys...
Obviously still a fair bit of work to do here, but yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, but yeah, we touched on so many things. Like because we were originally talking about how many things we could possibly get through today, and I'm really impressed that you got through all of them. So thank you, Jeremy. You worked really fast, and as always, like an expert at explaining your steps and your thinking around it.
Thanks.
Had a lot of people in chat saying similar sorts of things. Beyond my skill level, Chris was saying, but fun to watch though. Yeah, it's all practice, but of course. Jeremy has been illustrating for a very long time, so but lots for us to learn, amateurs and you know professionals alike from each other. So hopefully there's some stuff you can pick up and some efficiencies there and some understanding about the process as well. There was a question about did either of you go to Adobe MAX 2020? What were some of your favorite sessions? Yep. So I worked on that. And there's a whole bunch of sessions. In fact, the one shout out I will give to you is to search for the Gemma O'Brien video, because that is going down probably tomorrow, because that was only up for 3 months. So that's going to be my shout out for you, Jessica, to check that out. She's a fantastic illustrator. Also here from Sydney, Jeremy and I know as well. Thanks everybody for hanging out in chat. Alex Lahores was in chat as well. He's a fantastic illustrator, good mate of ours. If you're looking for more inspiration, we'll be getting him back on Adobe Live at some point this year as well. So check him out. You'll find him in chat. Very, very talented human who I met through Jeremy. So thanks again, Jeremy. But yeah, thanks for hanging out, Jeremy. It's been fantastic. I really appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you again sometime.
Yeah, it's been super fun. Thanks for having me again. First one for 2021. I'll finish this illustration up and send it over to Flynn, and you guys can have a look at it potentially as a link to this file on the video, maybe.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, we'll share that in Discord.
Yeah.
So shout out for our Discord. Jump over there, say hi. If we ever get sort of templates or examples of work or references or anything like that, that's where we'll archive that stuff and hang out when we're not on stream. So jump over there and say hello. And thank you, Jeremy. That'll be awesome. We'll love to check it out.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody. And we'll be back with Dale Bagini next Wednesday. So Wednesday here in Australia, and Tuesday afternoon, I think, in the US or wherever you are in the world. We hope to see you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. And catch you around.
See ya.